Nuevamente un saludo cordial para toda la audiencia de logística.la. En esta ocasión muy especial nos acompaña el experto, el doctor John Gattorna desde Sydney, Australia, y el doctor Eduardo Vargas de UTI Colombia y CSCMP. Señores, bienvenidos.
Thank you, Jorge. Dr. Gattorna, thank you for your time for this interview. We're gonna go with the first question of the interview. Taking into account the predominant lack of infrastructure in our Latin American countries, what major strategies from supply chain standpoint do you think companies in this region will have to apply and implement to remain competitive and efficient facing the global market?
Well, I'm one of the few people in the world who looks beyond infrastructure. I think we've lived in a period over the last 30, 40 years where there's been a preoccupation with infrastructure and more recently with technology, and that's okay. And certainly those things are necessary. And in some countries, like India, they're doing things to overcome the problem by, instead of building roads, building railways and free trade zones, etc. But I think in South America, you've got an opportunity to leapfrog all of this and go straight to the heart of the matter, which is people. Because what my research and my books show over the last 25 years is that supply chains are actually driven by people. People at one end we call customers, people at the other end we call suppliers, and people in the middle who are the enterprises themselves. So I think there's a fabulous opportunity in South America to not go through the tenuous thought processes that we have in the West over the last 30 or 40 years, but to go straight to where I think the best companies are now and apply the thinking which says, well, if we can understand better what customers are asking us and what supplier expectations are, we can do a better job of creating alignment with our customers. And in the process, we can remove a lot of the guesswork, a lot of the over-servicing, a lot of the under-servicing, and we can end up with much more efficient supply chains in this day and age when efficiency is terribly important. So, I think that's a fabulous opportunity, and really the only thing holding us up from doing something like that is the will to do it, the willingness to try something different rather than the previous periods where we've been in many ways just guessing, doing things on the inside of the business, building our supply chains from the inside out, when actually the new insight is, which I'm going to be talking about at the conference, is designing our supply chains from the outside in, and in the process becoming a lot more efficient.
So, el doctor Gatorna, él se considera una de las pocas personas en este mundo que mira más allá de la infraestructura. En los últimos 30 o 40 años, la infraestructura ha sido una preocupación, la tecnología también. Eso está bien, pero y son cosas necesarias. Pero él ve, por ejemplo, cómo India hace cosas para ir más allá de esos problemas y en lugar de construir de repente caminos o zonas francas, hay una gran oportunidad para saltar todo este tipo de problemas en economías como la nuestra y darse cuenta de que el corazón del problema es la gente. El doctor Gatorna habla sobre su libro en donde él cita sobre el hecho de que la gente es la parte principal, tanto de los proveedores, de los clientes, de las compañías. Él considera que es una oportunidad fabulosa en Latinoamérica no ir por el tema tradicional y el problema tradicional, sino saltar ese tema y comenzar a preocuparse en lo que actualmente las mejores compañías se están preocupando. Hay mucha expectativa de los clientes, hay que crear alineación con esos clientes. Él va a hablar en la conferencia sobre ese tema. Hay problemas de niveles de servicio, de exceder niveles de servicio o estar debajo de los niveles de servicio, pero la eficiencia al final es muy importante. La oportunidad es fabulosa para preocuparse sobre lo que realmente hace la diferencia y no estar adivinando, digamos, en la cadena de abastecimiento y comenzar a no hacer el enfoque tradicional de mejorar desde dentro de la compañía hacia afuera, que es lo que por muchos años se ha hecho, sino, y él lo va a explicar luego en la conferencia, mejorar desde afuera hacia adentro, rediseñar la cadena completamente desde afuera hacia adentro y articularla eficientemente hacia el cliente. So thanks, Dr. Gattorna. The second question is, despite the considerable increase in the available knowledge and skilled professionals in the supply chain management discipline, industries and companies still feel that operational problems and their complexity are out of their reach or management capabilities. Do you think that our discipline, from the practitioner's standpoint, should start shifting towards a more scientific approach rather than the managerial traditional point of view?
Well, my answer is definitely yes, and it relates to my first question, my first answer as well. We must go to a more scientific approach, because what we've been doing is, in our traditional approach, is feeling our way, bumbling along. Now, the only thing that's saved us over the last 20, 30 years is growth. And we've seen around the world in different economies huge growth, and South America is right in the middle of a lot of that growth now. And the one problem with growth is that you learn nothing during that period. It covers up a lot of sins. It doesn't actually allow us to be motivated to look for other solutions. And so what's happened over the years is that we've adopted this, and this is a whole Western world problem. It's in the US, it's in Europe and everywhere. We've adopted what I call the one-size-fits-all approach, where we've been searching for the perfect supply chain that will, be perfectly a perfect set of processes, and it will, service our customers. The problem is that not all our customers are the same. And my research shows that there's a range of different buying behaviours. In other words, customers have different preferences, the way they want to be served. Some customers want to, be serviced in a way and treated like a loyal customer, and where relationships are important. Other customers don't want those relationships; they just want a consistent service and low cost. Yet other customers, and there's more of these at the moment, are creating a lot of volatility in the market, and they change their minds, and they create all sorts of havoc. And yet other customers are looking for creative solutions to major disruption. So the one-size-fits-all philosophy is dead, and the question then becomes, how can we how many different supply chain configurations do we need in a typical company to give us at least an 80% fit to our marketplace? And this is really the whole business model that I've been working on since 1989. The interesting thing is that if we can find a solution to this problem, it will by definition reduce complexity, because a lot of the complexity we're suffering today is not just from the outside environment, but it's from the world inside our business that we're creating. By putting in inflexible ERP systems, we are creating incredible inflexibility inside our company, and we're trying to operate in one way when our customers are asking us to deliver in different ways. And this creates misalignments, and it creates exceptions, and that creates complexity. So one of the things that I'll be talking about in my first paper at the conference is solving the problem of how many supply chain configurations do we typically need in a business, and the answer is somewhere between 4 and 5. And once we know that, we get that information by interrogating the market and then reverse engineering back into the marketplace and putting in place the different lines inside our businesses. So yes, we can follow a much more scientific approach now. The problem we've got in the past is that the practice has been going faster than the theory, and it's people like me that have got to sort of try and understand the practices of the best companies of the world: Zara, Apple, Unilever, Schneider Electric, these sorts of companies, and understand what they're doing and extrapolate that and develop our theories from there, and then institutionalize those theories for dissemination to other parties.
El doctor Gattorna lo que comenta es que definitivamente sí, hay una diferencia y debería haber un enfoque más científico en el tema de supply chain en la vida real. El enfoque tradicional siempre ha sido acerca del crecimiento y buscar crecimiento de la compañía. En todo el mundo ha habido un crecimiento, sobre todo en el mundo occidental, en Estados Unidos y en Europa, pero el problema del crecimiento es que no nos enseña nada, nos hace la vida más fácil y no nos exige a buscar otras soluciones. El problema también del mundo occidental ha sido mucho el enfoque en que una solución sirve para todos los problemas y finalmente estamos buscando la supply chain perfecta y los perfectos procesos y finalmente no nos hemos enfocado en servir a los clientes y porque los clientes no todos se comportan de la misma manera. Los clientes tienen diferente comportamiento, preferencias. Los clientes, algunos son leales, otros no les interesa la relación con la compañía, sino que les interesan los bajos costos. Y hay cada vez más de este tipo de clientes. Y eso genera mucha volatilidad en el mercado. Hay que crear soluciones para finalmente enfrentar a este tipo de clientes. Lo que el doctor Gattorna va a enfocar en la conferencia es que ese enfoque de que un modelo abarca todos los problemas está muerto. Lo que necesitamos es cuántas configuraciones de supply chain necesitamos para finalmente atacar al cliente y lograr satisfacer las necesidades de todos los clientes. El doctor Gattorna desde el año 1989 ha hablado sobre este modelo de negocios y en lo que se ha enfocado es en tratar de encontrar una solución al problema, porque esa es la solución que realmente va a reducir la complejidad. No ver necesariamente fuera de la compañía en solucionar, sino que internamente ver la manera de remodificar la compañía, porque hemos creado mucha complejidad dentro de la compañía, hemos creado sistemas ERP que son muy rígidos e inflexibles y hemos creado procesos que finalmente nos hacen muy inflexibles ante el cliente. Eh, Eso crea desalineación y crea complejidad, crea excepciones. En la conferencia el doctor Gattorna nos va a enseñar cómo resolver este problema, cómo identificar cuántas cadenas de abastecimiento necesitamos realmente. Normalmente él comenta que una compañía normal puede tener de 4 a 5 cadenas de abastecimiento, configuraciones de cadenas de abastecimiento para lograr su objetivo. Hay que ver el mercado y comenzar a interrogar el mercado para finalmente hacer una ingeniería reversa y definir el enfoque correcto de cada una de las compañías y las prácticas que tenemos que aplicar. Obviamente el doctor Gattorna también comenta que la práctica ha ido más rápida que la teoría, pero gente como él, entiende que lo que hay que hacer realmente es extrapolar lo que hacen las compañías con las mejores prácticas como Unilever, como Shell, como las compañías que él ha hecho consultoría y finalmente lograr aplicar estas soluciones a toda la cadena de abastecimiento en todas las compañías. So, the third question is, we know you're coming to Bogota for the first CSCMP International Symposium on Supply Chain on July the 31st and August the 1st. And actually, I mean, we know you're not coming, you're not be present, but you'll be on a video conference and you're also planning to come maybe next year. That will be an honor for us. So we know your topic is on dynamic supply chains and supply chain alignment. Could you please briefly describe the content of your presentation and tell us how attendees will benefit from listening to it?
Okay, thank you, Eduardo. Look, you know, again, harking back to the problem that I posed that we have with our supply chain designs now, the one-size-fits-all, the complexity that's been arising, the sort of one-dimensional view of the world, the logistics operations mindset, all of these things have, you know, combined to make life much more difficult, particularly with the much more volatile operating environment we have now. So I've been working for many years now on trying to come up with a new business model, and as I said earlier, to create a sort of a framework or a theory. And in doing so, I've in many ways had to go outside the narrow confines of the knowledge of logistics and supply chain as it was in the 80s and 90s, and really try to come to a new understanding of how the typical enterprise works. And in the process, we developed a model that we call the dynamic alignment model, And what this model basically says is, and it's a business-to-business type model, or it can be a business-to-consumer model, essentially has 4 levels, and it says if you want to do well in your enterprise, you have to line up 4 things. You have to understand the market, you have to respond to that market. The third thing you have to do then is you have to underpin your strategies with cultural capabilities inside the firm that will propel those strategies into the market. And finally, you have to have a leadership style in the company that will shape the cultures to drive the strategies into that marketplace. Now, in my first paper on the 31st of July, I'm going to concentrate on describing that model in detail, and in particular talking about the most fundamental starting point, which is to interrogate the marketplace. And we call that market segmentation or customer segmentation. And there's a lot of mythology around about this at the moment. There's many ways that you can segment your customers, but there's only really one way that is useful to inform the design of your supply chains, and that is to use behavioural segmentation and look for the biases in a marketplace for any given product or service, and then group people together with common biases or common preferences. And out of that, you then discover how many major segments that you'll have in a marketplace, and as I said earlier, you can then drive back into the business and begin to put some meat on the bone, as it were, and put together the individual different supply chain configurations, which are just a mixture of processes and people and organisation and KPIs and technologies and all the things we know we put together in different recipes. So that's what I'm going to do, and that's what we call outside-in designing. In the second day, on the 1st of August, I'm then going to go into a lot more depth on the bottom half of that model, which is about implementation. It's about getting into areas where most people are not comfortable, and many consultants are not comfortable, where we have to look inside the organisation, try to map the cultural capability inside the business, and if necessary, start to genetically engineer or re-engineer that culture so that it is capable of driving a collaborative supply chain, or a lean supply chain, or an agile supply chain, or a fully flexible supply chain, or indeed a project supply chain. All these different supply chains have different operating characteristics and deliver different benefits to the customers, and we need at least those 3 or 4 or 5 different configurations to get the alignment we're looking for. So I'll be talking a lot about culture and the necessity to organise ourselves differently. I'm pushing the idea of getting away from just purely a functional organisation, but using a combination of functional specialists and clusters of different disciplines of people drawn from those functions to drive the horizontal supply chains across the business. And of course, in the Spanish-speaking world, there is no better example than this, than Zara or Inditex. And I had the great honour of being invited to Inditex at La Coruna last year, and I went and spent a day with them, and I saw a lot of the things in practice that I'm talking about here in principle. So that's what we're going to do on the second day. So I think in terms of the benefits, I think the great benefit of the audience hearing me speak will be that they will have a completely different view of how to conceptualize the supply chain, how to design them. They'll know the sorts of steps. If they get hold of my book, they can get a lot more detail, and that's going to save them a lot of grief and pain and complexity in the years ahead.
El doctor Gattorna comenta que va a hablar sobre lo mismo que hemos conversado en las preguntas anteriores, el de una solución, enfocar todos los problemas, o esa visión unidimensional de una sola cadena de abastecimiento desterrar ese concepto y comenzar a enfrentar temas de volatilidad y el ambiente operacional. Lo que tiene el doctor Gattorna va a crear un marco de trabajo, una teoría en donde finalmente él lo ha hecho desde hace muchos años y ha revolucionado el conocimiento de supply chain management que había en los años 80 y los 90. Él comenta que tenemos que entender que el enfoque típico tiene que cambiar. Lo que él ha creado es un enfoque que se llama alineación o alineamiento dinámico, que sirve para tanto business to business o business to consumer. Ambos enfoques funcionan y lo que hay que hacer es básicamente ir desde afuera hacia adentro, entender primero el mercado, saber cómo responder a ese mercado sería el paso número 2, y el paso 3, definir la estrategia o las estrategias y a través de ellas las habilidades culturales que tiene que tener el equipo en la compañía para liderar. En el punto número 4 sería el estilo de liderazgo finalmente, a través de todas las estrategias anteriores para finalmente ganarse a esos clientes y mantenerlos. El doctor Gattorna va a hablar los 2 días de la conferencia. El primer día lo que va a hacer es digamos, descubrir el modelo en detalle, cómo entrar y enfrentar al mercado, cómo saber que el mercado tiene una segmentación, hay que comenzar a segmentarlo, hay que comenzar a segmentar a los clientes, porque cada cliente tiene motivaciones diferentes, tiene comportamientos, comenzar a ver esos comportamientos y finalmente agrupar a esas personas en clusters o en grupos por digamos, el comportamiento de cada uno, las expectativas de cada uno, y con eso ir hacia atrás en el negocio, hacia atrás para comenzar a poner, digamos, un poco de carne en el hueso y individualmente configurar las diferentes supply chains. Habrá supply chains, cada supply chain tiene sus procesos, su gente, su organización, sus KPIs, indicadores, su tecnología, y, y en el segundo día, que es el segundo día para el doctor Gattorna, nos va a explicar cómo implementar ese modelo que hemos diseñado en el primer día, cómo finalmente llegar a hacerlo realidad, hacer que lo que la mayoría de gente a veces rehuye y la mayoría de consultores inclusive quiere escapar a este tipo de temas, de hacer un match con la cultura, de reencontrarse con el tema de la cultura y ver si realmente la compañía es capaz de ser realmente ágil o lean, digamos, ligera, flexible, y cómo esos conceptos de diferentes configuraciones de supply chain impactan en la compañía y cómo las personas tienen que, dentro de la compañía, actuar para lograr servir al cliente de esa manera. Diferentes supply chains exigen diferentes características operativas y manejan diferentes beneficios para los clientes. Y el doctor Gattorna comenta que 3, 4 o 5 diferentes configuraciones van a ser suficientes para una compañía, pero es necesario el trabajo en la cultura. Es necesario actuar diferente a lo que estamos haciendo ahora. Finalmente, el doctor Gattorna habla también de un clúster o agrupación de disciplinas, de personas interdisciplinarias que funcionalmente vayan a través del negocio. No hay mejor ejemplo, por ejemplo, el que cita el doctor Gattorna, de la compañía española Indutex o la marca Zara, que es muy conocida aquí en Colombia también. Él tuvo la oportunidad de viajar y visitarlos y ver cómo ellos aplicaban este tipo de conceptos en la práctica. ¿Y cuál va a ser los beneficios de la audiencia? Bueno, el poder luego de escuchar al doctor Gattorna definir su visión de supply chain y de diseñar esas diferentes configuraciones, identificarlas dentro de su compañía y saber cuáles son los pasos luego de eso para finalmente comenzar a implementarla. El doctor Gattorna también sugiere leer su libro, porque aquí está el enfoque en mucho más detalle, para poder obviamente aliviarse muchos dolores de cabeza y ahorrar muchos esfuerzos y tropiezos, comenzar a implementar este modelo. So, thanks, Dr. Gattorna. Finally, we would like you to invite our audience to participate in our upcoming CSCMP symposium in Bogota. That's going to happen on July the 31st, so this month by the end, and August the 1st of this year.
Yes. Well, I certainly recommend as many people as possible come to the symposium, the first symposium, which is obviously sponsored by and supported by the CSCMP. I'm disappointed that I can't physically be there, but I will be there in spirit and also on the audio visual, and I look forward very much to coming next year.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr.
Eduardo, one other thought, Eduardo. I'm just wondering whether it would be good to have 50 or 60 copies or something of my book there. I can get them sent directly from the publisher in the UK, and I can get a big discount, 60% discount on them. The reason I say that is that I find that when I talk, people get interested in things I say, and then they go looking for extra information and they can't find it easily. But if we had some copies there, you could sell them to people, that would cover the costs, and we won't have any disappointment. And if you need more, I can always get more. What do you think of that idea?
I think that's a great idea. Actually, for other authors like Thomas Goldsby, where we can contacted his editorial publisher, and locally they are bringing, I guess, 35 books. So we can obviously work on that, Dr. Gattorna. That would be great. Are you talking about your last book or the
Yeah, I'm talking
book?
about the last book, which is called Dynamic Supply Chains, and that fits very well with my whole speech, and it's got all the detail in that. Why don't you send me address details, and why don't we order 50 books, and I will, if you don't, whatever you don't get rid of, I'm happy to absorb the cost of that. But I think you'll find that you will get rid of them all. And next year, when I come, I'll have my latest book, which I'm still in the process of writing, which is going to have the same major heading, but the subheading is going to be how to design, build, and manage people-centric value networks. So I'm starting to branch out and educate people that supply chains are not really linear chains; they're more value networks, and that's going to be the theme in next year. And that book will be available. By March, April next year. So it would be available for your conference and symposium if you have it at the same time. So we could have it. The next book would be available for next year. All right. Thank you for today. And thank you, Jorge Luis, and looking forward to participating in a few weeks.
Dr. Gattorna, thank you very much again, and I hope to see you in the event.
Okay, thanks. All the best.